What is up, YouTube? I'm Devon DaVinci, leader of the Renaissance crew, and you're watching DaVinci Reacts. Today, we're going to be getting into another history-themed video. This is a video that goes kind of in line because I did mention this in one of my previous videos. What happened to the old Japanese flag? Now, I have had some people on some of my videos that talked about the imperial Japanese flag and said that in a lot of Asian countries, it has just like the exact same negative connotation as the Nazi flag. And I was under the assumption that Japan still kind of uses that flag for some of their military units, I think. I could be completely wrong, but somebody let me know in the comment section down below. Now, of course, before I jump into this, we are talking about a period in Japan in which they did a lot of heinous stuff. But with that being said, the people or Japan in the past is, I'm not holding them accountable for what they did in the past now, because the people now aren't those same people, and they had, or at least I believe that, they understand the significance of what they've done. For those of them that haven't, then that is bad on them. We need to make sure people are held accountable for when they try to deny the past, whether it's atrocities or whatever else. That includes America too. Like I said, I've had some people try to say, "Oh, well, look what Americans did to the Indians. And isn't that a genocide?" Yes, it is a genocide. We should acknowledge that that was in fact a genocide. That the Manifest Destiny was pretty much a genocide. But with that being said, Japan is still one of my favorite countries in the world as far as culture and whatnot. I would still love to visit. But with that being said, I can still acknowledge the atrocities that they committed. I still want to do a video on Unit 731 because, like I said, that story really screwed me up. And I think it would be interesting to find if I can find a video that's around 30, no more than 30 minutes, then I think it would be a really good reaction video. But with that being said, let's jump into this. This video is called "What Happened to the Old Japanese Flag?" It was uploaded by a YouTube channel by the name of History with Hilbert. And yeah, I will have a link for their channel at the end of this video. The last 30 seconds, you'll see an icon pop up. If you click on it, it will take you to their channel. You can like, comment, subscribe, all the other good stuff. And it will have a link in the description box down below that will take you to the original video if you want to watch it without me pausing it, talking over it, whatever else. Also, if you happen to be a reactor and you want to react to it yourself, then that is the link that you will use to get to the original video. Now, with that being said, let's jump into this.
This is the Japanese flag, and actually coincidentally, it's also a pie chart of how much of Japan is Japan, as the meme goes. But in this video, I want to take a look at the history of this flag, because as we can see from this really nice image, it's already quite an old flag that was used for a long time.
I know it represents the rising sun.
But of course, if we look at some more of Japan's recent history, like in the Second World War, for example, we find another flag, a rising sun flag. So in this video, I want to look at when did this change? Was there a change in flag, and how are these two flags related? Why do we find in the earlier period and today that this flag without the bars is found, but in the past you do find this one in the Second World War? Well, first of all, the flag without the bars on, so just with the red dot, is called the Hinomaru. And this is relating to the sun. It's called the flag of the rising sun is often used for the other one, but actually the red dot is also symbolizing the sun. And this is again to do with the name of Japan in Japanese, Nippon. This actually means the land of the rising sun, or it has a lot of connotations with that.
I never understood why countries use names for other countries that aren't that country's official name. Like he said, Nippon is what Japanese, please forgive my pronunciation. Nippon is what Japanese people call Japan. Why do we call it Japan then? Why don't everybody call it Nippon? I don't get that. Like, Spain is what? No, the language is Espanol. Maybe Spain is Espanol too. I don't know. But why don't other countries call countries by the name they call themselves? I'd like to really know that.
this actually means the land of the rising sun, or it has a lot of connotations with that. In the Japanese folk religion or Shinto, you have Amaterasu, which is one of the
I know
sun
about that.
goddesses, and for the Japanese, the emperors were thought to be
Thanks to
incarnations
Okami, I know
of the
that.
sun, descendants of the sun. So this is clearly very important. Now in Japan,
Most of my knowledge of Japanese mythology comes from video games and anime, so forgive me.
Incarnations of the sun, descendants of the sun. So this is clearly very important. Now in Japan, you had a lot of noble families of different ruling classes, and these had their own symbols as well, called mon. And actually one of these might be very familiar. One is of the Mitsubishi clan, which of course today they started producing cars, so they're famous worldwide.
So, because like I said, I get all of my cultural stuff from Japan, from anime and video games. So I know about like clans and families having like historical roots, and certain families have higher prestige, things like that. Is Mitsubishi one of the families in Japan that goes way back? And is there still families today that have like really big historical figures in them, and they're still like, they still have that same reverence? Like, I know Oda Nobunaga. Does Oda Nobunaga's clan, or his family that he came from, are they still around? Do they still identify as the Nobunaga or the Oda? Because I forgot Oda Nobunaga. I think Oda's the family name, right? Do they still have their clan, and are those members of that clan still like revered around Japan or Nippon? That's something else I'd like to know. I'm gonna be asking a lot of questions.
The yellow one is the imperial symbol, and the others I just really liked because they've got cranes on them in black and white. But essentially, that was the case in Japan. You also had, of course, the Hinomaru, this with the sun flag, but it wasn't connected to a national idea. Although when many of these families did start to fight each other and to try to take over Japan, like Oda Nobunaga, Tokugawa, and various others, they would often see this flag as a symbol that represented bringing every of these clans together. Now in 1854, the situation changes slightly, because at this point the Tokugawa shogunate is ruling over Japan. They've conquered all of Japan, and so they actually order that.
So that is the person that killed Oda Nobunaga, right? That last name looks familiar, and I think I remember seeing this in the History of Japan video by Bill Wirtz.
Shogunate is ruling over Japan. They've conquered all of Japan, and so they actually order that their merchant ships should use this flag on their ships. Now this again is because of increased contact with Europeans. Of course, when Europeans came to trade, they all had flags on so you could identify where they were from, and so this is an idea that the Japanese borrowed. Now in 1870 actually, they passed that this was the official flag, the de jure flag of Japan, the Hinomaru, and that it was also used on merchant vessels, for example. So both on the sea and on land, this became the official flag. However, in 1885, there was a law passed that essentially got rid of all the old laws that weren't in this Gazette of Laws that had been published. And actually one of those laws was the fairly modern law from 1870 that had made this the official flag.
Restoration,
so technically, right, from 1885 onwards, Japan had no de jure flag. However, of course, the Hinomaru remained the de facto flag, as in they continued to use it. But legally speaking, it wasn't their national flag. And we can see this from artwork at the time. Of course, the late 19th century is when the Japanese Empire was founded. They started to expand outwards into China. This image is from the end of the First Sino-Japanese War. And you can see on the tents, obviously, they have the red Hinomaru being shown. And in this image, for example, from the Second Sino-Japanese War, after the invasion of Manchuria, you can see they're using the Five Races flag, which I talked about in my video about the Chinese flags, and also the Hinomaru to represent Japan there. But in this image from the
this is actually an interesting picture in a way. I mean, I don't know if there's maybe some hidden meanings behind it, so that it could have some negative connotations. But I like I said, I understand what Japan was doing behind the scenes in China, so it's like, yeah, it's not hitting on me. But what is interesting is the fact that this picture shows what looks like Chinese and maybe Korean, but it seemed like Japan and like all of them are together, and it looks relatively equal, which is interesting because, like, given the fact that Japan at the time, which was, let's be real, was pretty much a fascist government at the time, I would think if they were going to do some type of like propaganda, it would show like Japan above the others in some way. And in this one, it's like relatively everything is equal. I mean, the Japanese kid is slightly above the other two, but it just seems weird. Like, I know what they were doing behind the scenes, but this picture, it's interesting that, like, were they trying to promote themselves as bringers of peace and reuniting like Asian countries together or something? Like, what was their messaging at the time?
The Hinomaru to represent Japan there. But in this image from the Russo-Japanese War at the turn of the 20th century, we do actually see another flag being used. And actually this flag is often called the Rising Sun flag, and this is the one that I mentioned earlier. And this is actually a special variant of that flag, but as I said, it's known as the Rising Sun flag in English, or in Japanese as the Hiyashi. And actually this symbol is also found on some of the clan Mon from earlier in Japan, this rising sun again. The sun, of course, is a very important symbol for the Japanese, as I said, and the rising sun motif with the rays coming off the sun is also an older idea in Japan. And actually in 1870, when you had the merchant flag and the national flag on land becoming the Hinomaru, actually the Hiyashi is also adopted at the same time, but for the war fleet of the Japanese, for the military ships that they had. And this is, of course, the famous flag that we most often associate with the Japanese in the Second World War.
What's funny to me is the Meiji Restoration period is the period in which the emperor was given power back and pretty much started running the country again, because before that it was the shogun and the emperor was kind of like a figurehead. What's interesting is the shoguns in the past took over control because they were like the military arm. They were all the samurai combined and organized pretty much. What's funny is the Meiji Restoration was supposed to restore the emperor, but what it did was it just took the power from the shogun and gave it to this new military branch that was like modeled after Western powers. So it's like it went from one military arm to another, all the while continuing to pretend that the emperor was the leader when really they weren't. Because from what I heard from the stories, Emperor Hirohito didn't even, well, I ain't gonna say didn't want, but he wasn't fully behind the military actions that were done by people like Hojo and the military arm of the Japanese Empire, but he didn't really have a choice because he didn't have the power to stop the military from doing what it wanted to do. It was like the military was its own separate arm that was able to just go out and do what it wanted, and they just used the emperor as like a propaganda piece to rally the citizens behind. But it was really like, what was his name, Tadeki Hojo and the Japanese military that pretty much controlled what Japan was doing.
Of course, the famous flag that we most often associate with the Japanese in the Second World War, or at least I certainly do. Especially, actually, that there are two different versions of this. Now, I always thought the one on the left was just the Japanese flag with the sun slightly offset. But in fact, there is actually a difference, because there is another variant which has the flag, the sun, exactly in the middle, so it's horizontal. And this is because with it in the middle, it was the flag of the army, so the land forces. Whereas the offset version was actually the flag flown by the Japanese Navy. So in 19 actually the flag flown by the Japanese.
I see. Everyone comment that the MP40 shouldn't be shown here because the Imperial Japanese Navy never used it. Okay.
Navy.
So
in 1945, of course, the Second World War came to an end. The Japanese surrendered, and
ahead of time.
Most of the time, when people surrender, that means that there's a change that occurs. And in the case of the Second World War, it meant that a lot of flags changed as well. Think, for example, today the Germans don't use the swastika anymore, and for good reason.
Yeah.
And of course, this meant that the Navy also changed its flags, and the country infantry itself, of course, kept the Hinomaru as we know it. But the Navy really did like the old flag. And so in 1954, actually, they changed the flag, but not really. They basically just made the shade of red lighter. Now, we have actually got another game of Spot the Difference coming up. And this is because in 1974, there was a bit of a crisis in Japan, and several of the politicians tried to push through a bill to make this the official flag. Because, of course, while it was being used de facto, de jure, it wasn't the flag and hadn't been since 1885. But there was a lot of opposition to this because of Japan's role in the Second World War. It's also why they don't have essentially an army that goes out to fight in other places. If you look at the name of the Navy, it's not called the Japanese Navy, it's the Japanese Maritime Self-Defense Force. And I believe
after World War II, they pretty much were not, I don't know if necessarily allowed to have an army, but they weren't, well, truthfully, nowadays, they don't need one, because if something happens with Japan, the United States and allies are going to come in their defense. Like that, we got Japan's back. We've had our differences in the past, but us and Japan are cool now. And yeah, I mean, I would love to see like China also under that wing, because China was victims in World War II. So I would have loved to have seen that happen. I mean, the reason why you don't really hear a lot about the atrocities that happened in Japan in the West enough is because China became communist, and Western powers didn't want to promote any type of sympathy for communist countries. That's the reason why a lot of people don't know about things like Unit 731. But even with that being said, I think we should still all acknowledge, like, Japan or China went through some shit. Like, I'm still a fan of Japan, and I still love Japan. I would still love to visit it. I love the people. I love the culture, things like that. But we still need to acknowledge that China went through some shit. I know what I'm saying could be very controversial, but it's just how I feel. I'm just letting you guys know, honestly, what I feel about the situation.
The army is called something similar to the Self-Defense Forces of Japan.
They do have a defense force,
that they took after the Second World War. But there was a lot of opposition to it, and it didn't go through. However, it came to a head again in 1999 after a school teacher committed suicide because of this debate that had gone on in the school about whether they could fly the Hinomaru, so the flag, and sing the national anthem as well.
Suicide?
And actually, this prompted there to be a bill that actually did manage to get through Parliament, so it officially became the flag. But at this point, they had
national anthem song
stipify which of the shades of red they actually had to use. And so there is another meme which is like, can I copy your homework kind of thing, which is about the Japanese flag changing from a slightly darker shade to a slightly lighter shade. And it does seem that nowadays the Japanese do use a slightly lighter shade of red. But there are even more controversies to do with the rising sun flag outside of Japan. Whereas inside Japan, the Hinomaru controversy was very big. Outside of Japan, no one really thinks that the Japanese flag is controversial. However, it's not the same with the rising sun flag. And this came to a head in 2018 when there were joint military activities going on, training sort of expeditions going on in South Korea. And the South Koreans specifically asked the Japanese Navy, the Maritime Self-Defense Forces, not to fly the rising sun flag, just their national flag and the flag of Korea. However, the Japanese admiral at the time said, absolutely not, we're flying our flag, and this is our naval flag, and we're proud of it, and so we'll fly it. But actually, the South Koreans then said, no, you really have to change that. You can't show it here because it's offensive to Koreans. And so the Japanese pulled out of the military practices there, which just goes to show how strongly people feel about these flags. Because for the Japanese, this is their maritime flag.
Before he goes into it, because I know he's going to talk about like how other countries feel about it. I would, like, if it were up to me, and I know it's not, I'm just giving my opinion. My opinion doesn't mean anything, but I'm just going to give it to you anyway, because welcome to Devon DaVinci. But if it were up to me, I would at least change the flag. Like, don't keep flying the same one. I absolutely understand why certain countries would be offended by using that flag. Um, it's the same way I feel about the like the Confederate flag, for example. Some people try to change it around slightly and say, "Oh, it's not the same thing." Well, it is a flag that is tied to something that represented something else. Now, that flag just represents the military aspect of Japan, and I don't think Japan was necessarily like that flag was 100% like we are looking to enslave other races and Japan is the number one I don't think that's what it's about, but at the same time, with the things that happen with like the comfort women in Korea and things like that, yeah, I'd probably change the flag a bit. Like, don't fly the exact same flag. But yeah, like I would, I gotta say, I would just change it a bit. That's what I think is because it Japan can acknowledge today that the people that did the things in World War II are people that should not be looked at proudly. Like the actions that were committed, you shouldn't be proud of. And you acknowledge that, and it will admit that, okay, yeah, that was wrong. We shouldn't do that. So if you can acknowledge that Japan at that time is not what you are today, I think your flag should reflect that and change, just like with your government. Um, yeah, that's my opinion. Again,
They're proud of it. They say it's their proud maritime tradition. They're a proud people. But for people like, especially the Koreans and also the Chinese and other people in Asia, that flag, the rising sun flag, is a sign of the past, of the Second World War, when many atrocities, terrible atrocities, were committed in the name of the Imperial Japanese Empire, and the flag is a symbol of that to them. And some would even go as far to say as that the Japanese rising sun flag is actually tantamount to showing the Nazi swastika in Europe at the same time. So I don't know what you think about this, but I thought it was a very interesting topic to look at where these two flags came from and how they were used and how they're still controversial today. Do let me know what you think. Is it the same as showing a European swastika? Should the rising sun flag be banned in all its forms, or is there scope for reclaiming this kind of flag, using it in a different way, and breaking from the past? Please do let me know. I'll put a card poll up and in the comments as well. I'd love to see some discussions about this in the comments. I honestly haven't really made up my mind about this issue. I'm just showing it to you as I encountered it and found it. But yeah, do let me know what you think about this, and share it around if you think it was interesting.
I just
and if you
noticed
did
the
enjoy
figures
it,
are
do give me a
very
thumbs up,
alternate
that really
history
helps me out.
hub-esque.
All right, everyone. Thank you very much. I have been Hilbert, and this has been The History.
Okay, I'm going to hit that like button. Oops, missed it. There we go. Hit that like button. I do that on camera now to encourage people to hit like if you enjoy videos, because people don't hit like enough, and it definitely goes a long way to supporting the channels that you enjoy. Not just letting us know what types of videos you like, but also helps with favorability in the YouTube algorithm. But it feels funny for me to say things like this only because, or to talk about subjects like this, because I feel like people, when they see me talking about these things, and I blame the internet for this, I feel like when people see me talking about things like this, they think that I have an issue with the subject of the country as a whole or the people or something. That's not the case. Now, I know the internet nowadays is like people want to throw everything in a group and just generalize everything, but just know I try not to be that. Like I said, I absolutely love the Japanese people. I absolutely love the Japanese culture. I absolutely love some of the efforts Japan has done to step away from that. Now, I do think they need to do a bit more in some areas when it comes to embracing what they did in the past and acknowledging that we were wrong. Now, that's not all of Japan, obviously. Like, there are some mainly more of the conservative-esque people tend to think that they didn't do like that bad in World War II, or they like, things are blown more out of proportion than they thought it was. And in that case, I think that those people are a bit harmful to when it comes to moving forward. But yeah, like I said, I love Japanese people. I love Japan. It's kind of the same thing with Turkey. I did a video about the Armenian genocide, and I've had some people have discussions as if me saying that Turkey should acknowledge this is like me saying that Turkey or the people in Turkey today are like bad or wrong or anything like that. Now, don't get me wrong. I do have a somewhat problem with the current head of Turkey, what's his name, Erdogan. I don't agree with him on a majority of the stuff that he does. But with that being said, that still has nothing to do with the Turkish people or the Turkish culture. I'm still a fan of Turkey. I'm still a fan of the Turkish people. I'd be looking at some of the food they be making. That stuff be looking to bomb. Like when it comes to like some of the things they use to when it comes to like hygiene and everything, it's like even when you go back in the past, it was ahead of its time. And like I embrace and enjoy the cultures. Hell, the Ottoman Empire. I'm a fan of that. Like I enjoy the Ottoman Empire, learning about it and whatnot. But when it comes to atrocities, I call a spade a spade. Like it's wrong. Like I said, somebody tried to point the finger at America and say, well, look at what America did. Like they did this to the end. I'll see that and I'll raise you more atrocities we've done. Like I have no problem acknowledging that America has done some screwed up stuff, and we should 100% acknowledge it and admit that we did wrong. And if we can, try to help the people in any way that we have done wrong too, to help them get back on their feet and move forward. Like, I still think that it's wrong how we not handled, but how we kind of just like dumped China to the wayside after World War II because they fell into communism. Like they still had a bunch of atrocities and things committed against them, and we should have helped them get back on their feet after that, no matter what government was in place at the time. I mean, you could say the same in a way with Russia. I mean, don't get me wrong, Stalin was fucking reprehensible, but they still suffered a lot of deaths and things like that after World War II. We should have offered them some type of help as far as the cities and things like that. Now, I mean, I would imagine Russia eventually helped themselves and recovered. I mean, they were one of two world powers, only one of two world powers in the world. So I don't think they really needed too much help. But I mean, hell, even just the thought of offering the help goes a long way. That goes for a bunch of other stuff too. I know we helped France and them. America should help out countries in Central America. All the stuff we did in during the Cold War, fighting against communist rebels. When you talk about like the banana republics and things like that, we should have gone out of our way to make sure those countries were back on their feet, because we did things that completely destabilized them. When you talk about Iran, the current situation that's going on in Iran is almost squarely on American shoulders. Like we are the ones that went in there and committed a coup d'etat and got rid of the duly elected person that was elected there. And we got rid of their government and tried to install an American puppet pretty much. And then when they had a revolution and kicked them out, now we want to turn them into the bad guys. Like, no, we kind of put that on ourselves. We got to stop getting rid of countries simply because they don't necessarily follow our interest. Like if you truly believe in democracy and that's who they chose, then that's who you have to let run. Unless they're doing some type of human atrocities or human rights violations, there's no reason for you to step into it. I mean, we see how we feel when somebody meddles in our election. So the last thing we should be doing is meddling and interfering with other people's elections. Same reason why we lost South Vietnam. That same thing. We tried to overstep our authority, and look what happened. You can point to a lot of different places around the world that we've done that too, like in Chile and technically in Cuba. Like, there's a lot of places where we did some heinous stuff, and now the problems of the world are almost squarely the result of those bad actions, and we need to acknowledge that. And don't wait 100 years in the future to acknowledge it. Like, acknowledge it when you can. But anyway, I hope you guys enjoyed this video. If you did, make sure you hit that like button, subscribe, and share. I look forward to seeing you guys in the comment section down below to let me know what you all think. Hopefully this video didn't get me put on some type of list. No telling. But I look forward to seeing you guys again. I do stream 3 days a week, Mondays, Wednesdays, and Fridays at 3:30 p.m. Eastern time. Sometimes 4 p.m. Eastern time. It depends. But if you guys want to drop by, feel free to. I always try to have a stream scheduled at least a couple hours before it goes live. Lately, I've been doing it maybe not 12 hours, but I'd say about 9 hours before it goes up. So I try to give people enough time to be able to like set a schedule for it. If you want to know exactly when it happens, hit that bell next to the subscribe button. And when I go live, you should hopefully get an email or something. I don't know how it works because truthfully, I don't hit the bell on most stuff I'm subscribed to. So I'm not going to be mad at you if you don't hit the bell, but that is just another option you have if you want to get notified. Yeah, that being said, I'm going to give you the deuces. Hopefully you've been enlightened, and I'll see you guys on the next video. Peace.